Time to rebuild. Well, sort of anyway. We're gonna rebuild the rear end of the car basically completely today. We will go through the front end, mainly just to make sure everything's aligned and straight and true, symmetrical on both sides, but the front end isn't my main concern today, it's the rear. We're gonna go through, rebuild the shocks with some of this 3K fluid. We'll rebuild the diff with the 1 million diff fluid, and we're also gonna try something that a lot of you have mentioned. We're gonna add another trans riser. Hopefully that'll help us with traction, and hopefully that'll help us get to see some more consistent fast passes. Maybe a long video, so let's jump straight into those shocks. Today I'll be filling these shocks back up with some 3K fluid. This is diff fluid. Like I mentioned in another video, I used to run 100 weight shock oil in my rear shocks. This 3K diff fluid is roughly the same as 100 weight oil. It's actually just a little thicker, so I'm hoping that'll help me stiffen up the rear just a bit. Just gonna fill these back up. We're not gonna install them on the car just yet because we're gonna get into that diff and the transmission. We're gonna let those sit for a little bit. They'll need it. Since it's a little bit thicker fluid, it'll take a little while to get all those air bubbles out. In the meantime, we'll start pulling the transmission out the car. Should be pretty straightforward with this as well. Like I said, we're just gonna go in and replace the diff fluid. I haven't touched it since I first built this car, and we have a good bit of passes under it now. So it's probably a good time to replace that. And then we'll go ahead and talk about that trans spacer as well. Pretty simple and straightforward, although quite a bit messy. We got the diff fluid replaced. You probably saw that there was basically nothing left in the diff. Like I said, after a whole bunch of passes with the car, that diff fluid, it was time to replace it. There was nothing left there to actually work anymore. Hoping that'll fix a lot of my issues with the car not leaving straight anymore. The diff doesn't have any fluid in it, it can't operate the way it needs, and that 1 million weight diff fluid helps to act like a lock diff like I talked about in the past. It helps keep the car straight on the launch, but on the big end it helps stabilize the car. If you go back to some of my very older videos where I ran a lock diff, you'll see where I had a lot of trouble keeping the car straight down track. And the minute I switched to an open diff again, that all got fixed. So now, pretty good indication, hopefully anyway, that my main issue there was diff fluid. We got that replaced. Now just to throw the transmission back together. I talked about the trans spacers, but I actually don't think I'm gonna add any more. Most of you talked about running 3 trans spacers, and I thought I only had installed 2 for whatever reason when I built the car, but I actually am already running 3, so I don't think I'm gonna add that 4th one just yet. We're gonna go out and try the car with the fresh diff fluid and the rebuilt shocks with the 3K diff fluid in the rear shocks and see how that fares. Hopefully that'll be enough for us. I'm gonna get this transmission finished up. We're gonna get it back in the car. I'll be able to put those rear shocks back on by now, hopefully. And then we'll go ahead and align the front of the car, make sure everything's all aligned and straight. Then we'll be ready for some passes soon. Now on to realignment. Some of you may remember my cheap on-the-fly alignment kit. This is all 3D printed parts. Not the most accurate, being that it's 3D printed, but it does the job for what we need. I've been going through and aligning the front here, basically getting my camber and toe set up. I realized that I had some negative camber in the front, so I wanted that to be closer to 0. I don't think that has as much to do with my issues I was having, but just set that as close to 0 as possible. You can see I have a sheet of carbon underneath here just to give me a nice flat hard surface to work with. To get me a 0-degree camber, I used a paint can actually. Set it up next to my alignment jig here and just adjusted the turnbuckles using a turnbuckle wrench, turning back and forth until I got them lined up perfectly with the can, meaning they are perpendicular to my carbon fiber plate. As for toe, I realized there was a whole lot of toe out built into the car. And I realized that should kind of help keep the car straight, but it also scrubs a little bit of time off. Any resistance you have from the front wheels trying to pull away from the center of the car like that will slow the car down. I brought that toe in a good bit the same way, but actually went a little bit toe in. Hopefully this will give me the same result, helping to keep the car straight, but have less resistance, as this thing had a whole lot of toe out. I don't have an actual degree measurement, as like I said, this is just an on-the-fly 3D printed alignment jig that I set up. Now I'm just gonna go to the back. I believe I already know in the rear what I'm working with. I did set that up when I first set the car up, but I just want to make sure our camber is as close to 0 as possible again. Not gonna mess with no toe or anything on that. That involves changing out the blocks in the bottom. And then the last thing to do is just set my wheelie bar and we'll be ready for some more tests. When it comes to setting and adjusting the wheelie bar, this is definitely the most difficult wheelie bar that I've worked with. Between my old car and the wheelie bars that I've made, and this wheelie bar on the DR10M now. I really like it. I like the length of it and the design, but it's a little difficult to adjust. You have to pull the wheels and tires off just to get to this adjustment screw, unless you have a ball-ended hex driver or want to use those little bitty L wrenches. So you kind of gotta get creative sometimes to get your ride height correctly. Put the wheels and tires on the car, measured my ride height, and then I put together some caps of different sizes to get my ride height correct. That way now I can come and adjust my wheelie bar, get it to the height that I want at ride height, and tighten it all down. Make sure we're all squared up. That way when I put the wheels and tires back on, we're ready to go. Well, I think that'll finish it off. We went through, rebuilt the shocks with some 3K fluid. We rebuilt that diff. Didn't mess with the transmission spacers this time. Went ahead and did a realignment on the entire car and reset the wheelie bar as well. So I think the car is back, ready to go, ready to make some passes and see if we can see some more promising passes than that last time out. Unfortunately, we're getting some really terrible weather right now. I won't be able to make any hits today, but a lot of you commented and said you wanted to see the rebuild video, so here it is. I hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see the next passes with this thing and see what this rebuild did to the car, if it helped out, if it'll help us make some straighter passes. Make sure to click that bell icon as well to get notified when that video goes live. Leave a like if you enjoy the video, and as always, thanks again for watching. Peace.